Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today I'm going to discuss the trace elements and trace minerals, which are selenium and chromium. Selenium is an essential element for humans, and especially in regards to the enzyme which is called as glutathione peroxidase. If you recall, I have repeated a number of times that nature has provided us this protection against free oxygen radicals in two forms. One is in the form of enzymes, and another is in the form of vitamins. So those enzymes which detoxify free oxygen radicals, they include catalase, peroxidase, and superoxide dismutase. So this peroxidase is, again, they are require is with the name of the glutathione peroxidase, has a role in detoxification of hydrogen peroxide, and selenium is a constituent, a requirement of this enzyme glutathione peroxidase. As well as we have antioxidant vitamins, which are again act against free oxygen radicals, and vitamin E is very important in this regard, and vitamin E also requires selenium for its antioxidant function. Now, as far as is the foods are concerned, which can give us a sufficient amount of selenium, among these we have Brazil nuts, and Brazil nuts are the best source of selenium. Then tuna fish is an excellent source of selenium. Hams, then foods which are fortified with selenium, pork, beef, turkey, and chicken are the mainly they are the sources from the animal origin. Only we can see that the Brazil nuts, they are from plant origin. Otherwise, uh, we are mainly they are from the animal origin. Now, as far as the absorption, transport, metabolism, and excretion of selenium is concerned, the inorganic salts as selenite and selenates, these are being used for food fortification and as a dietary supplement. They are almost completely absorbed from the GIT. And selenium, which is being absorbed in the form of inorganic salts, it is incorporated mainly into the protein that is called glutathione peroxidase, and other proteins which are called selenoproteins. Now, selenium from organic sources, they contain selenium in the form of selenomethionine. In the first slide, we saw that selenium is being a component of a number of proteins which are called selenoproteins. So, as far as the function of selenium is concerned, 30 or more biologically active selenocysteine containing proteins. Selenocysteine means the protein which has cysteine residue, amino acid cysteine, as well as selenium in its structure. Uh, and some of the most important these selenoproteins are glutathione peroxidase. So now it is clear that glutathione peroxidase is a selenocysteine containing protein. Then we have another enzyme that is called as deiodinase. And there are three types of deiodinases. We will mainly concern with the type 1 and type 2. And these deiodinases are also selenocysteine containing proteins. These deiodinases are membrane bound selenocysteine enzymes, and they are mainly concerned with the provision of intracellular thyroid hormones. They can either amplify or reduce the T3, the thyroxine, the active triiodothyronine, the active form of thyroid hormone. Whenever there is a need, they can increase the synthesis, or whenever there's less requirement, they can reduce the T3 level by addition or removal of the iodine atom. Then another selenoprotein is thioredoxin reductase, again, which has a role in detoxification of free oxygen radicals. And we also have certain proteins, selenoproteins. These selenoproteins also has antioxidant functions. Now, the most important enzyme in regards to selenium is glutathione peroxidase. Now, what happens that mostly this glutathione is in the oxidized form. So it has to be first reduced so that it can perform its antioxidant function. So what happens that this oxidized glutathione, how it is being reduced and how it convert hydrogen peroxide into water, it is being shown in this figure. You can see that enzyme glutathione reductase, which is requiring FAD. FAD is from the riboflavin, the coenzyme form of riboflavin, as well as it requires NADPH, which is the reduced form of niacin. So this NADPH provides electron. Enzyme is glutathione reductase, and we have oxidized glutathione. So the substrate is oxidized glutathione, reduced form of NADPH, enzyme glutathione reductase, which require coenzyme FAD as a coenzyme form. So ultimately this NAD is oxidized to NADPH is oxidized to NADP, and oxidized glutathione is reduced to reduced glutathione. Now this reduced glutathione will is a requirement of enzyme glutathione peroxidase. Glutathione peroxidase also requires selenium. So in the presence of selenium, this reduced glutathione add electron to the hydrogen peroxide and reduces it to the two water molecules. So this is the mechanism how glutathione plays its role via enzyme glutathione peroxidase, and every time when a glutathione peroxidase reduces hydrogen peroxide to water, it is again oxidized, is being converted into oxidized form, and again this cycles goes on. The second selenoprotein is diiodinase. As I told you earlier, diiodinase type 1 and type 2 has mainly role in the provision or maintenance of intracellular thyroid hormone concentration. Thyroid hormone is normally present in two forms, that is the tetraiodothyronine, which is also called thyroxine or T4, and the active form of this thyroid hormone is T3. So what happens that this deiodinase 1 and deiodinase 2, you can see there, it's involved in the activation of this T4 into T3. So what happens that one iodine molecule is removed from the T4. T4 means four iodine molecules are attached to the tyrosine residue, and T3 means that one iodine molecule is being removed. So T4 is now converted into T3, and simultaneously the deiodinase 3 also involved in the inactivation of this T4, and it convert T4 into reverse T3. So you can see the difference between the T3 and the reverse T3. You just see the structure of this T3 and look at the positions of the iodine. So it is the iodine position which make T3 active form of T3 and reverse T3. Remember, reverse T3 is an inactive form. So just the position of iodine can activate or inactivate T3, and ultimately it is then converted into uh, uh, 3 3 prime diiodothyronine, which is the inactive form of this thyroid hormone. The another selenoprotein is thioredoxin. Thioredoxin acts as an antioxidant by facilitating the reduction of other proteins. This is very important. If you see that thioredoxin is a protein and it has cysteine residue in its structure. You can see a disulfide bond there in the TXN, and it is the oxidized form. Like glutathione peroxidase, this thioredoxin has to convert into the oxidized thioredoxin has to convert into the reduced form, and again for this reduction we need the reduced form of NADPH. Enzyme is thyroredoxin reductase, and that reductase will convert oxidized thioredoxin into reduced thioredoxin. So now you can see the sulfhydryl group or the thiol or the SH group is reduced. Now this reduced thioredoxin, it acts as a antioxidant. How? Now since it is reduced, now it will reduce the other proteins. What happens? It's number one, if you see it, that various target for this is natural. What it do, it captures free oxygen radicals. ROS scavenging means free oxygen radicals are being being captured and they are being reduced, and it also is being required for DNA synthesis, And this reduced thyroidoxin has a role in the activation of transcription factors. Transcription factors we have just discussed in the topic of zinc, that transcriptional factors are requirement of the RNA polymerase, and they have a role in the binding of RNA polymerase to the DNA strand which is supposed to be transcribed. And then it also has a role in angiogenesis, and it is an inhibitor of apoptosis. Apoptosis is the programmed cell death. As we have discussed all vitamins and minerals and trace elements, in either they are when they are taken in excess amount or when there is a deficiency because of some reasons. So a range of deficiency state has also been identified as far as the selenium is concerned. And when there is a severe deficiency, the two disorders are being observed. One is called Keshan's disease and another is Cashin-Beck disease. Now, this Keshan disease is being named after the county of the North China where its symptoms were first noted. And in the Keshan disease, there is a congestive cardiomyopathy. There's a mainly involvement of the heart muscles are being involved, and that is being caused by a combination of the dietary deficiency of selenium and the presence of mutated strains of Coxsackie virus. So the etiology includes the deficiency of selenium as well as the mutated strain of Coxsackie virus. And the another disorder is called Cashin-Beck disease, a disorder where mainly the bones and joints are involved of the whole body, and mainly you can see the joints of the hands and fingers, elbow, knee, and ankle. Three major joints. Beside that, the bones of the hands and the finger of children and adolescents who slowly develop stiff, deformed joints. There is a shortened limb length and short stature due to the necrosis of the growth plates of the bones of the joint cartilage. So epiphyseal ends of the long bones, they go necrosis. So there is a short stature and there is a shortened limb length. Now these are the signs and symptoms of Keshan disease. Let me repeat again that symptoms are those which are being told to you by the patient, and signs are those which you observe when you physically examine the patient. So patient will give you a history of fatigue and diarrhea and vomiting and body pains and lethargy. Beside that, there will be weakness of the heart muscle. There will be fever can be measured. Pain cannot be measured. Lethargy can be briefed by the patient. One can find out arrhythmias, signs of cardiac insufficiency, and on the x-ray there will be heart enlargement that can lead to heart failure and loss of the heart tissue. So mainly it is the cardiomyopathy or the involvement of heart which is the characteristic sign of the disease. Now this is the picture showing you the victims of Cashin-Beck disease. If you recall, Cashin-Beck disease mainly affects the joints and cartilages of the hands and feet and that of the elbow, knee and ankle joints. And because of the necrosis of the epiphyseal ends of the long bones, there is a short stature. So you can see here the people with the short stature and the deformed legs, and you can see there's a shortening of the even fingers and those of the bones. We just discussed the two disorders related to the selenium deficiency, that is the Keshan disease and Cashin-Beck disease syndrome. What happens if the individual consume excessive amount of selenium? Selenium can get deposited there in the liver and can lead to liver cirrhosis. It can lead to enlargement of the spleen. The patient may give you a history of gastrointestinal bleeding and depression. Now I will discuss the second trace mineral, that is the chromium. And chromium is an essential trace mineral. It is a metallic element that people require in very small amounts. So the word trace elements and trace minerals indicate that they are required in small amount. And this chromium uh, improves insulin sensitivity. And if you recall, insulin is an anabolic hormone, and it has an anabolic effect on all three macromolecule metabolism, that is on protein, carbohydrates, and lipids. It promotes protein synthesis, it promotes glycogen synthesis, and it promotes synthesis of the triacylglycerol, and which is the storage form of this fats. It is a transitional element. Transitional elements are those elements whose valencies can be changed. So it is a transitional element with valency of 3 plus to 6 plus, and it has many industrial uses, and it is charged, it has been there in the environment as industrial weight. The biologically active form of the plus 3 chromium is known as glucose tolerance factor. So as far as the chromium is concerned, its role in the human being is concerned, you should remember that chromium is a part of the glucose. It is known as glucose tolerance factor. The glucose tolerance factors require chromium for its bio function. As far as the good dietary sources of chromium are concerned, one can find chromium in processed meats, whole grain products, green beans, broccolis, and some spices. As far as the recommended dietary allowance is concerned, it has been set at 3 picograms of chromium should be consumed per day by men, and 25 picograms of chromium per day for women. Absorption, transport, metabolism, excretion of the chromium as far as concerned, that chromium with the 3 positive valency, it is being absorbed from the intestine by passive diffusion, and mainly 0.4 to 2.5% of the dietary chromium, or in whatever form it is consumed, it is being absorbed by passive diffusion. The rest is being lost or the mainly excreted via feces in unabsorbed form. The fraction of the chromium which is being absorbed, it binds to the plasma transferrin. If you recall, transferrin is an iron transport protein. So chromium has a same affinity, a tendency to bind with the transferrin. So it competes with the iron for binding to the transferrin. So in the plasma, it is transported by a binding to the transferrin, plasma transferrin, and when it reaches to its target tissue, it get deposited or concentrate in liver, spleen, and soft tissues and bones. So these are the sites of deposition of chromium. Urine chromium output is around 0.2 to 0.3 picograms per day. So recall the requirement was also in picogram, and 0.2 to 0.3 picograms per day is being lost in urine, and mainly it varies depending upon the amount of chromium consumed in diet. If you recall, I told you that you have to remember one thing regarding chromium, that chromium is also being named as glucose tolerance factor. It has a role in regulation of blood glucose concentration. So there is a proposed mechanism that how this chromium maintains blood glucose level. So what they have suggested, that low molecular weight intracellular octapeptide. Octapeptide is means that a peptide having 8 amino acid linked by peptide linkage, which is being named as chromomodulin. So there is an intracellular octapeptide chromomodulin is there, which bind with the chromium and enhance the response of insulin receptors. Now what happens, insulin is a hormone, and there are many hormones which cannot enter into the cell, so they bind to the receptor. So now its proposed mechanism is this, that the inactive insulin receptor on the cell membrane, Insulin receptors are always present on the cell membrane, and they are converted into active form only when insulin binds to that receptor. Binding of insulin to cell membrane receptor will cause conformational change and will result in the activation of this insulin receptor. So what will happen? This binding of insulin to receptor will also stimulate the chromium entry into the cell, target cell. Okay, the first thing is that insulin will go and bind to the its receptor on the cell membrane, and that will result in the activation of insulin receptor. Activation of insulin receptor will motivate the entry of chromium inside the cell, and we know that an octapeptide, that is chromomodulin, is already there inside the cell. So when this chromium will enter into the cell, it will go and bind to chromomodulin, and this chromomodulin will then activate the enzyme. This is called as protein kinase, which is required for the mediation of insulin action. And by this way, this chromium or glucose tolerance factor activates and motivates the cell functions, this insulin effects. Now, as plasma glucose insulin level become normalized, normoglycemic means concentration. So what will happen? This chromomodulin will release chromium from it will detach chromium from it, and this function is now being ceased. As far as the deficiency of chromium is concerned, the chromium has mainly concern with the regulation of this blood glucose concentration, and it is mainly concerned with the action of insulin, hormone insulin. So what happens, this deficiency sign and symptoms of chromium were observed in those patients who were hospitalized for a longer period, and they were on the parenteral nutrition, means they were not taking anything orally, but they were on drips and other things. So in these patients, they develop insulin resistant glucose intolerance, means that their glucose levels were not responding to the injectable insulin. These patients were losing weight, and in some of the cases they develop sign and symptoms of neurological deficit. So when they added chromium to the intravenous insulin, the glucose tolerance was reversed, insulin requirement was reduced, and eventually, with the passage of time, those neurological disorders were towards the improvement side. So it is being said that the chromium is mainly play a role in impaired glucose tolerance, in diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Now, if you recall, why we were discussing the properties of the chromium, that it has 3 plus to 6 plus valencies. It is present in these forms. And hexavalent chromium. Hexavalent chromium means chromium with the 6 plus valency is being recognized as carcinogen. Carcinogens are those elements which can cause cancer. And industrial exposure. If you recall, chromium is a trace element, and it is a metallic element as well as. So the industrial exposure of fumes and dust containing this metal is associated with the increased incidence of lung cancer, inflammation of the skin, which is called dermatitis, and skin ulcers. Chromium picolinate is mainly used as a dietary supplement and for the fortification of food. So excessive consumption of chromium picolinate can cause renal and liver damage when it is being used in excessive amount or in high doses. Now, as far as the laboratory diagnosis of the chromium deficiency is concerned, we don't have any practicable method for assessing intracellular chromium deficiency. Only this glucose intolerance patients, when we give them chromium supplements, and if they are showing improvement, this is the only mean of confirming chromium deficiency. So when we give chromium to those patients, diabetic patients who are on insulin, and if they are showing you a good glucose control, or then it means that they were chromium deficient. So ultimately, we conclude that chromium in trivalent form, in 3 plus valency, is an essential nutrient. It is a glucose tolerance factor, and it has mainly role in the glucose metabolism by maintaining the blood glucose level and by regulating the insulin secretion and function. Insufficient dietary intake of chromium is associated with increased risk, especially in regards to type 2 diabetes mellitus. Type 2 diabetes mellitus is maturity onset diabetes mellitus, and chromium deficiency can also lead to cardiovascular disorders. The mechanism of absorption and transport of chromium ions are still uncertain, though to some extent we saw that they are being absorbed by passive diffusion, and for transportation they bind to the this iron transport protein, that is transferrin.